Hello everybody, and welcome to my second video on this channel. And today we're going to talk about something that made me particularly angry and murderous. Now, I'm not sure if any of you follow my Instagram, but I put up a story ages ago about a journalist on the Daily Telegraph called Sherelle Jacobs, who had said some particularly worrying things about climate change, criticising Greta Thunberg, not for the way that she's presented herself and not for the way that she has conducted herself, but criticising her for the fact that she denies the climate emergency, essentially, this journalist. So very worrying stuff from her. She said all sorts of other things that I'm sure would make her an extremely fun person to be around. And she is, as one of my friends put it, quite simply, a bit of a fruitcake. So she's back with a piece that I saw on Snapchat under the opinion section, saying that it's been claimed that Meghan and Harry left Britain because of racism, but she thinks otherwise. So essentially this is about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, who are stepping back from major royal duties. And there's a multitude of reasons why. Now, the official title of the article is called "Why the New York Times Got It Wrong About the Sussexes and Racism." And essentially, a lot of people have been claiming that racism was one of the factors for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle leaving the country. They're going to move to Canada, I believe, and wanting to step back from royal duties. Now, there are, as I said before, there are so many different reasons why they have taken the step that they have taken. I would probably say the most blindingly obvious one is press pressure, media pressure. Being a royal is an extremely stressful job, and you're under constant scrutiny from the media. And Prince Harry has spoken before about how he is particularly affected by it and how he worries for his wife about it, and that how their mental health has become a bit of an issue because of the press pressure. He likened it to his mother, Princess Diana, who was always under constant scrutiny or coverage from journalists. Journalists were always there. In fact, the reason why her car crashed was because they were trying to get away from journalists. So you could say that they are responsible, in fact, for the death of Princess Diana in that car accident. That is, if you don't believe the conspiracy theories about certain members of the royal family orchestrating the whole thing. Anyway, I digress. So, why the New York Times got it wrong about the Sussexes and racism. Now, as I said before, press pressure was a big factor of this, and a lot of people have accused the press of being quite racially prejudiced towards Meghan Markle, and it's not easy to see why. Now, Sherelle Jacobs here goes through the potential arguments and tries to, in her strongly opinionated view, debunk them. So I will read it out I'll read out the important points to you. It's not a very long article, and I will try and debunk them for you. So here's the first paragraph. Pause it if you want to read the text. I won't read it out, otherwise it will take too long, but here you go. So she's talking about these wild claims of institutional bigotry, and she mentions the unburstable London bubble. Now, generally, this is the only time I'm going to say this, I agree with the sentiment of what she's saying, where essentially the southeast is where all of the media attention is focused, because obviously London is our capital city. That's where most of the business is done, rightly or wrongly, and there is a huge gap, both generally in terms of poverty, I suppose, but predominantly in terms of how well informed, how engaged in politics you are, how involved you are in the workings of the country, there's a big gap between the southeast and the north. So a good example of that is political engagement. Now, she's talking about the sort of, I suppose you could say, snobbery of the southeast bubble, and I do agree that there is a big problem with, for example, the People's Vote movement predominantly took place in the southeast, and it came across as a lot of people from a comparatively privileged position saying, we want this, even if you don't want it, it has to happen because we know what's best for you. Generally, there's a lot of hyperbole about how awful Britain is now because of Brexit and whatever, blah, 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 blah. And I do not particularly like that hyperbole. I think we should still believe in Britain no matter what. And I think this idea of being overly dramatic and painting everything as overly negative is, for the most part, a bit of a problem. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. You have things like the climate crisis that are just important and need to be solved now, but that's not what I'm talking about. That's kind of independent of current affairs. That's something that's always going on and always has to be addressed. However, she is being equally as hyperbolic and equally as dramatic in this first paragraph, and she knows it very well. Calling the whole of East Coast America pathologically self-absorbed is a case in point of this. She's kind of criticising everybody for being so overly dramatic about what's happening. She's doing the same thing herself, just with the opposite argument. So I think this first paragraph as a whole is trying to fight the fire that she's criticising with fire of equal proportions from the other side. So I think that's quite hypocritical of her.
So here's the second paragraph. It's right at the bottom there. Here you go.
So she's mentioning a slightly prejudiced press and a brazenly bigoted political apparatus. And she's using this phrase paints a picture here. Now, she's using this hyperbolic language again to try and highlight the so-called absurdity of the situation, that it's absolutely absurd that our political structure is bigoted, and it's absolutely absurd that our press is slyly prejudiced. She's very much implying that this is hyperbolic and it doesn't happen. But it does happen. We know very well that various institutions in the British press are very prejudiced and bigoted to a certain extent. Case in point, the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail, for example, has run various articles referring to foreign-born British athletes as plastic Brits. The website Another Angry Voice has some very good examples of this. In particular, it makes reference to the fact that the Daily Mail in the 30s supported the British Union of Fascists and Oswald Mosley and were very sympathetic to Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. There are other examples from other newspaper institutions. For example, The Sun. The Sun have run deliberately provocative headlines about minorities. For example, 1 in 5 Muslims have sympathy for jihadis, which was a big headline that they ran a few years back, and that was later debunked to be false. So they've printed a falsehood about a minority that's deliberately designed to provoke Islamophobia in people who aren't particularly informed about that type of issue. And obviously you have the Telegraph, where Sherelle Jacobs herself works, has published articles that reference calling black people pickaninnies, which is a racial slur, and I apologise that I've had to use it. That was Boris Johnson, the now Prime Minister, who said that in the Telegraph. So, you know, it does happen, Sherelle, it does happen.
And here are the next couple of paragraphs.
So, I take issue with the thing that she said. Apart from the fact that only truly mangled logic could interpret exotic DNA as a genuine slur. So what she's saying here is she's implying that calling somebody's DNA exotic is not a racist thing. Now, it is not a slur in the traditional sense, in that you're not calling somebody a derogatory name, However, calling somebody's DNA exotic and saying it's not a slur is problematic because it doesn't make it okay. It is discriminatory because it promotes this idea of otherness. Exotic DNA, unusual, not the norm. And really, multiculturalism is in full swing. Believe it or not, there are people from different cultural backgrounds and people who have different skin colours that live in the same place. I know that might be hard to believe for some people. It's not really, but that happens. And to call somebody's DNA exotic even now really is singling people out based on the colour of their skin, based on their background, when really we should all be united. We're all British citizens, we all live in Britain, and even though I'm not really sure if Meghan Markle is a British citizen or not, I'm not entirely sure because I know she's American, but still the idea is the same. We are a multicultural society, and it's very important that we are all fully integrated because that's how it works. That's how social cohesion works. If you look at the most diverse places, often there is very little racism because people just don't think about the colour of their skin. We are just all people, and it works, and there is social cohesion. Calling DNA exotic, whilst as I said, it's not a slur in the traditional sense, is otherness. And that is often the problem with the press, is they don't often say overtly racist statements, but they constantly promote this idea, subtly promote this idea of otherness. Not enough that if you pick up on it you can outwardly directly accuse them of racism, but they just kind of segregate, in a sense. They kind of run a story about a minority, making them seem like the minority, when really we're all people. We shouldn't be segregated in society based on our race. I can't believe I'm saying stupid things like this to a fucking camera, and yet the press still do this. It does make me extremely angry, and to claim that it doesn't happen makes me even more angry. You've made me a very angry boy, Sherelle Jacobs. Meghan Markle has not directly been the victim of racism. However, she is often presented as other. She's got this idea of otherness. Note that there was a lot of focus, particularly on the dysfunctions of her family, when really the royal family is, in a sense, kind of very dysfunctional in itself. It was just constantly reported about Meghan Markle's family issues. Now, there has been a couple of things, for example, from the Daily Mail. They ran an article, and it was headlined, "Harry's girl is almost straight outta Compton." I've put the subtitles in the video there so you can see the spelling is the same as the Straight Outta Compton album. And again, I can't go into detail and explain why, but you just need to look at that and tell me that is not singling her out because of her race. Because it just is. It's making a reference to... I don't need to go into this, but you know that it is this sort of exactly what she is saying doesn't happen, subliminal, subtle promotion of otherness. It is exactly what she's not saying is happening because she's calling it directly racist, but it is happening. As well as ridiculous headlines like that, she has experienced some more general, less racially motivated, unfair press. For example, when Kate Middleton was pregnant, she was given a lot of sympathy by the press, and it was proclaimed to be baby fever, and they were all lovely. Oh, look at her baby bump. Now, when Meghan Markle became pregnant, she was accused of showing off her baby bump in a negative sense. The alleged feud between Meghan Markle and Kate Middleton is often reported on as, oh, Meghan's very angry at Kate. It was all fine before Meghan got here. And honestly, we don't know. They're just a random family. We don't know. Kate might have started it. Meghan might have started it. It might just be a personality crash. We don't know. It could have been someone else. It could have been some random person. We don't know, but it's constantly being portrayed as Meghan started this feud. Meghan's just joined the royal family and everything's fallen apart. But really, like, it's the inner workings of a family. It's being unfairly focused on her when actually there could be so many other factors at stake and we don't know. And again, these things aren't overtly racist, but given that these newspapers have a bit of a reputation for this, one can't help but make a connection between their historical discrimination and the unfair press that Meghan Markle, a mixed race person, is getting with this whole situation. She doesn't really make a counter-claim to that. She doesn't really even acknowledge that this is partly the press is doing at all. She says that the narrative that this journalist is peddling constantly overlooks the overwhelmingly fawning coverage that the Duke and Duchess have enjoyed. Yes, they have had some good press. However, she's completely overlooked all of the examples that I've just given, and that was even before I had to make this argument. There are so many examples of where Meghan Markle has been given quite unfair coverage by the press, and this is just kind of overlooking it. Prince Harry has talked about it too. Prince Harry's talked about racism in the media, and he's talked about the negative press that his wife has been getting. So she also mentions these bewildering acts of self-sabotage, and the two examples she gives is banning spectators from taking photos at Wimbledon. Well, is it too much to ask to have a bit of privacy? Is it too much to ask for people to not take photographs of you when you're just trying to enjoy the tennis? I don't think it is. Whether they're the royal family or not, people have a right to not have photographs taken of them constantly. Should I be even having to say this out loud? I don't know. And she also mentions sniping at the public about global warming while whizzing around in private jets. Now, this absolute moron has got a bit of a history of denying that there's a climate emergency. Right, ignoring the fact that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and other celebrities have already said, yes, we know it's a bit hypocritical of us to be flying around in aeroplanes whilst we're talking about the climate emergency. But A, it is still a good thing because they're using their influence to promote awareness of it. B, they do offer up a good defence in the sense that they sort of have to fly separately because of they're constantly invaded by the press and members of the public and their safety would be at risk. And C, this example is just Sherelle Jacobs' personal vendetta against climate change. To be honest, I don't know why she is against climate change so much, given that there is such a big scientific consensus on it. And to be honest, if we do all die from climate change, one of the very good things that will come of that is people like her, who constantly deny it, despite the fact that we're being given evidence of it, will die as well. And they had it coming, because they're the ones that have been denying the evidence that's right in their faces. So I hope that doesn't come. I hope it doesn't come to that. But this is just a horrible, horrible thing that people like her that are saying things like that about climate change are still being given a platform, still being put on Snapchat, in newspapers and stuff for the public to read and be misinformed about. It just really, really makes me angry, in case you haven't already been able to tell.
And here are the next couple of paragraphs.
The journalist points out the Prime Minister's track record, and Sherelle Jacobs is suggesting that the idea that he's had overtly racist statements is absurd. Now, absurdly suggests the PM has made overtly racist statements, even though he has. I already told you, pickaninnies with watermelon smiles. Pickaninny is a racial slur. And saying that they have watermelon smiles is just, again, I don't need to explain the racial connotations behind it. He's also made comments about Muslim women look like letterboxes and bank robbers. You can't get away with saying that. That is not a okay thing to say. This was only a few years ago as well. So she's implying that the idea that Boris Johnson has made racist statements is absurd. But it's not, because it actually has happened. If you're saying he's never said anything racist, you are straight up not being truthful. You're wrong. Whilst the statements that Boris Johnson has made in the past isn't directly impacting the Meghan Markle situation, it's setting a precedent for the press. If the Prime Minister can say provocative, controversial, divisive things, then the journalists think they can get away with it too. People in positions of responsibility saying things they shouldn't fuels journalists and the press to also say things that they shouldn't. So that's the problem with this, and that is why the Prime Minister can't say things like that, because it's negatively impacting the press and the media around him, and it normalises those things because people of responsibility are helping it be said. So that's the problem with that. Now, first of all, the thing about white working class boys performing worst in schools, I would probably say that is not a race thing. It's to do with the fact that obviously the worst performing schools are going to be in the most deprived areas, and the most deprived areas are often in the north, and the north has less multiculturalism than the south. So the majority of people in the worst performing schools are white boys, and that's why they end up doing badly. It's nothing to do with their race. I would say meritocracy does not get rid of institutional racism, and that is because if the foundations on which you build the meritocracy have bigotry in place, I'm not saying that the United Kingdom is a racist country, because I don't believe it is. However, if it is constantly a ladder that people are trying to climb in a meritocracy, then if you have all the prejudice at the top, as has happened previously, the prejudice trickles down, which means that people who come to this country from other places often don't come in the highest of social standings, because they're new to the country. They have to start their life again, basically, when they come here. So they start out at the bottom. In working their way to the top, in theory, if they're good at what they do, they should be able to get to the top. However, because if the top is already prejudiced, and if the top has historically been prejudiced, that trickles down and it stops people from reaching the top. So meritocracy does not necessarily get rid of institutional racism.
And here is the wonderful, beautiful final paragraph.
She's talking about tokenistic multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is not tokenistic. It's happening. Look, if you don't like the idea of different cultures living together, tough shit, it's already happened. Go somewhere, move somewhere else. If you don't like cultures being integrated, move somewhere where it's just one culture. Just do that. Like, cultures have integrated. Get over it. If you can't get over it, just go somewhere where there's only one culture and shut up. Anyway, so that was that shit show of an article, and I don't think any of her points were particularly very good, and I just think it was badly written, because she doesn't like climate change, and she doesn't like everybody saying that the Telegraph's racist. Because, okay, both of those things are happening. There is racial prejudice in the media still. It's not rampant, but it does happen in the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Telegraph, etc., etc. The Express. The Express is a bad one. Just all the other things that she doesn't like are actually happening, and you can't stare in the face of the evidence and just say, nope, that doesn't happen, because that doesn't make it go away. And I don't think Sherelle Jacobs understands that. She's an adult, she should know better. Anyway, that's what I think about it. I'll probably find one of her other articles later on and get annoyed about it and plan another 2 sides worth of script about it. Sorry this video was so long. Thank you all for watching. If you want to leave a comment down below with your opinions, then I will read them. Apologies, I have read the ones on the previous video, but I just never really got a chance to reply to them. If you'd like me to reply, you can set up a proposition, but I will try my best to read all of the comments, and they're always very interesting to get other people's insight as well. So yes, thank you very much for watching. and I'll see you for my next video.